Stories shape how we think about reality, defining not only who we are, but how we perceive the world and its possibilities. Stories are not necessarily what cause change, but rather inspire how we think about it. They construct frameworks of meaning, and through this we shape our values, actions, and beliefs. Stories can limit our imagination or free it. Stories trapped in cycles of despair, anger, or myth of the lone savior that become tales of endless cycles of struggle where power changes hands but oppressors remain. They lock us into believing that this is all there is and all that there can ever be.
Imagine a boot stamping on a human face forever.
Without stories that illuminate new possibilities, shining lights on pathways out of the shadow of what has been, the world becomes less a place for dreaming and more a prison bound by the weight of its own darkness. Donald Trump's victory in the 2024 presidential election was dominated by his embodiment of a mythic figure, a symbol of unyielding strength for those unsettled by a rapidly changing world. His appeal lay not in governance, but in storytelling, offering a vision of steadfast power and identity. Trump's myth resonates with many who feel disillusioned by a world of progress and inequality. His victory was driven largely by white voters, not just white men, who embraced the story he represented. A return to clear roles, celebrated strength, and grievances validated. But this narrative wasn't just confined to white people. It also captured many of those who bought into the myth that they too could become heroes, that they could win, even within a system explicitly built to keep them losing. These voters weren't just choosing Trump, they were embracing a narrative, casting themselves as both defiant anti-heroes and disenfranchised underdogs in his image. In Trump, they saw themselves as hated yet necessary, fighting against a world they believed had turned against them, seeking to restore it to its rightful place within the cycle of an inevitable status quo. This status quo, framed as tradition, as common sense, only feels inevitable because it has been reinforced through centuries of the same story, retold and shaped by systems of domination, exploitation, and oppression. It's the story that progress is dangerous, that hierarchy is natural, that order requires dominance. It's the same myth constantly dressed in new clothes, the same heroes with thousands of new faces wielded to justify power, subjugation, and exclusion, while pretending it's just the way things have always been, and thus always must be. There cannot be winners if there aren't losers, after all. Figures like the Daily Wire and the modern Republican movement thrive on stories scapegoating immigrants, trans people, and feminists, deflecting attention from real issues like stagnant wages and rising rents. As framing inclusion as a threat to tradition, these narratives fuel anger and division, embedding fear into the culture as a means of control for a divided population always looking to crush its next perceived threat before it can be hurt again. Reactionary creators weaponize shallow representation, portraying diversity as cultural threat. This so-called culture war merely reflects our attempt to find ourselves in stories that were never made for us, because our true stories were stolen from us. The stories we are told to shallowly see ourselves in often teach us to distrust change, to see others as enemies, and to view ourselves as either victims or enforcers of a system we're told is greater than us. They demand that we kill our hearts, that all we can hope for as oppressed is to simply one day become oppressors. And in this darkness, imagination falters, and we become trapped in cycles of fear and resistance, unable to envision a world built on hope, connection, and possibility. But that is their story. Yet the deeper problem isn't that those stories dominate, it's that they've left us with a void. What stories do we offer in their place? Many of us tend to critique rather than create. We expose flaws in harmful stories, but rarely spend the energy moving beyond them. Much of left-wing YouTube, for instance, revolves around reacting to right-wing content. And this reactionary pattern extends into media, art, and activism, where progressive narratives define themselves in opposition rather than forging bold, imaginative visions. For too long, our culture has been stuck in this reactive cycle. FD Signifier's wonderful new video, Edgelord's Movies Broke Me, exposes this with devastating clarity. Political campaigns, think pieces, and blockbuster films often critique the status quo without crafting frameworks for hope or change. Stories like Breaking Bad, Fight Club, or Joker aim to critique systems of power, but often end up reinforcing the very myths they attempt to dismantle. Those who identify with anti-heroes like the Joker or Tyler Durden see themselves as hated by society, turning to nihilistic destruction as a way to make others feel their pain. Even explicitly critical works like The Boys or Attack on Titan deconstruct toxic systems, offering no alternatives beyond pointing out that this is bad, while still showcasing the allure of power. Aggrieved viewers who identify with characters like Homelander or Eren Yeager often feel that the very narratives that inspired them, of heroes rising to greatness and changing things for the better from the top of a system, are vilified. Thus, they feel vilified because it's what they base their identity on. This disconnect, rooted in a failure to see how the system perpetuates their pain, feeds a cycle of antagonism. Us versus them. All with little to no room for genuine transformation or imagining something better. And unfortunately, even when we try to inspire, we can often fall into the same traps. Cycles of domination, power, and oppression. Narratives end up reinforcing the status quo as something that can be fixed, rather than something that must be fundamentally changed. The message becomes binary. Perpetuate the system or destroy it. And destroying it is filled with uncertainty because everyone fears what will come next because we have not been allowed to imagine it. I have a companion video to this one about how even in stories sold as progressive, we still tend to recycle the same tired structures, just putting in new diverse protagonists while vilifying others who dare to imagine something new. But this video, however, is about how we need stories that reframe how we think about ourselves and humanity. Stories that inspire emotions that shape reality and inspire us to move forward. We must unlearn the myths that trap us in cycles of dominance and despair and binary thinking. We need to recognize truly different stories instead of forcing them into the same molds of our biases and assumptions. We need stories that ignite our ability to dream, to open our hearts, to build a shared hope for something greater. What would these stories reveal? How could they reshape us? And how do we bring them from the margins to the center, making them the lens through which we see ourselves and the world? This video is a step on that journey, out of the spiral of decay, away from the shadows of stories that bind us, towards the light of stories that can lead us forward. And I begin with the types of stories that helped me find my own light, tracing how they connect to a larger flame, one that burns beyond me and illuminates a path for us all. Since for today's video we're going to be talking about stories that resist, it only makes sense that I will be, at some point, talking about a franchise that directly pushes back against the idea that resistance is futile.
Resistance.
And of course, that means I'm going to be talking about Star Trek at some point in this video. What did you expect of me? The only question will be, which one? Don't look ahead, don't cheat, don't do that. Don't look at that YouTube scrolly bar and look ahead. That's cheating. I'm looking at you. But if you're like me and you actually want to try to live in that Star Trek future, to step into the uniform, explore strange new worlds and new civilizations, and maybe even accidentally cause an intergalactic incident, then I have something for you. Star Trek Adventures is a tabletop role-playing game a la Dungeons & Dragons, though with a slightly different system, that lets you and your friends step into the boots, or exoskeletal appendages, of Starfleet officers. And I frankly love Star Trek Adventures. There's nothing quite like gathering around a table with friends, boldly going where no one has gone before, and then immediately realizing we should not be allowed anywhere near the final frontier. I actually once ran an entire campaign where me and my friends played the absolute rejects of Starfleet Academy. I, of course, was a sexy Andorian because, look at me, of course I was.
Good aim is hot.
Sometimes you just gotta be a little horny in space. Or a lot a bit horny. Did we accidentally destroy an entire planet? Look, in our defense, the Prime Directive is more of a guideline than a rule. At least, that's what I've been told. Could we have avoided it, though, with slightly better understanding of Starfleet technology? Quite possibly, and that is where the Star Trek Adventures Technical Manual comes in. This book is packed with everything that you need to enhance your Star Trek Adventures experience. Want to know how a tricorder works? Need to understand Starfleet's medical technology, ship systems, and transporter tech before someone gets beamed into deep space? Want to figure out what that weird electric effect actually was? It's all here, and this book is perfect for helping you craft your technobabble dialogue sequences. And if you're a dedicated TTRPG player, then this is even better. It's fully compatible with both the first and recently released second edition of Star Trek Adventures, as well as the Captain's Log solo RPG. Plus, it's got brand new game mechanics, dives deeper into both Starfleet and alien tech, and has over 20 random complication tables to make sure something goes terribly wrong at the worst possible moment, as all good TTRPGs should.
His brain is gone.
And I also should say, even if you don't play Star Trek Adventures at all, the Technical Manual is packed with all the schematic-y goodness that Trek nerds love. Because, let's be real, every Trekkie has at some point stared at a starship cross-section like it's the hottest thing they've ever seen. Because, you know, it is.
The Cerritos is a handsome lady.
You're damn right about that, Boiler.
So whether you're running a tight, well-oiled Starfleet operation, or like me, you're chaotically improvising your way through the final frontier, this book is an essential upgrade to your Star Trek Adventures experience. So consider ordering it at the link below, and you'll also be helping me out as well when you do that. And with that, let's get back to the stories. In I Saw the TV Glow, we follow Owen, caught between the oppressive expectations of suburban masculinity and the haunting allure of the pink opaque, a childhood TV show reminiscent of Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
This bathroom has a new supernatural infestation that no exterminator can take care of. It's the attack of the Drain Lords.
At first, the pink opaque appears to be mere escapist fantasy, but it eventually reveals itself as the true world, a reflection of Owen's authentic self, long buried. A queer childhood friend, who introduced Owen to the pink opaque before mysteriously disappearing, returns to tell Owen that they are not who they think they are. They are in fact characters from the show.
Just like I was waking up from a bad dream, that whole life, that whole reality where I was Maddie Wilson, drifted away. Like a brief hallucination that after a few moments I could hardly even remember. And all those memories that had felt so real washed away with the rain back at our old sleepaway camp. And I was me.
And to embrace this truth means Owen needs to quite literally kill his current self and step into the identity of Isabel, one of the pink opaque's protagonists, accepting the person that they've always been, but has been actively buried by the show's true villain, the sinister Mr. Melancholy.
Those memories were put there to distract you, to keep you trapped.
This isn't the Midnight Realm, Maddie. It's just the suburbs.
The suburbia Owen inhabits is exposed as a hollow prison, a dark, shallow, sad construct. It's an all-encompassing darkness to which the glow of the pink opaque is a candlelight, through which they can step into the vibrant, true world they were always meant to inhabit. Yet Owen rejects this, retreating further into his hollow performance of his constructed self, denying Isabel and clinging to the safety of conformity to the capitalist world he has felt that he always must inhabit. This tension between the dazzling glow of possibility and the suffocating grip of suppression mirrors the struggle of transgender self-realization in a world that punishes vulnerability and enforces conformity. The trans metaphor at the heart of the film is central to its narrative power. Owen's journey is one of disintegration, a rejection of transformation and retreat into a destructive false self, even as this role slowly kills him inside.
It feels like someone took a shovel and dug out all of my insides, and I know there's nothing in there.
This denial mirrors the experiences of many trans people who, in the face of societal pressures, suppress their truths and resign themselves to the safe but hollow roles assigned to them. Director Jane Schoenbrunn describes Owen as the least interesting character in the hero's journey framework, not because he lacks depth, but because his story challenges the masculine and cis-normative assumptions of agency and narrative progression. Owen's story is a dark mirror of Neo's in The Matrix, a depiction of what would happen if Neo took the blue pill over and over and over again, choosing denial over liberation, a hollow shell of a person performing his function, destroying himself on an engine of meaningless melancholy. The perfect tool for capitalism.
It was time for me to become a man. A real adult. Productive member of society. And that's exactly what I did. I even got a family of my own. I love them more than anything.
Owen's decaying body becomes a haunting metaphor for the cost of clinging to an identity that doesn't serve him, yet he's too afraid to leave because he has been told to think that his true self is something childish, silly, a kid's TV show. How can he, a man who must do his patriarchal duty for the world he lives in, ever be that powerful woman he saw on the TV screen? What a silly thought. So now, when he tries to look at the pink opaque, the world that embodies his true self, he dismisses it as nothing more than a childhood fantasy.
I started the pink opaque again. And it was nothing like I remembered it. The whole thing felt cheesy and cheap, dated, and not scary at all. I just felt embarrassed.
And yet, there is a bright heart within him, a flicker of hope he didn't expect to find. The film screams that there is some time to choose to follow that beautiful light of self and to reclaim humanity from the shadow of decay. I Saw the TV Glow is a desperate plea to reject despair and isolation, to reach for your heart. The film implores its audience to step off this doomed path, to confront the truths that frighten them, to embrace the transformation over stagnation, that there is still time to choose different because as long as you are alive, your heart still shines. However, the word still implies that time is not infinite. The lights can go out if you wait too long. Many cisgender viewers misinterpreted I Saw the TV Glow, reducing it to a simplistic critique of nostalgia and dismissing its trans subtext, a reflection of the lack of curiosity and empathy that the film challenges. Some argued that the film fell apart in its final act, claiming Owen never really fully denies his nostalgic longing. They framed the film as nihilistic, a warning against getting lost in the glow of a favorite TV show. But the whole point of the movie, as director Jane Schoenbrunn argued, was to critique this very dynamic by showing that Owen's fixation on the pink opaque isn't nostalgic longing, but a haunting reflection of his suppressed true self. His refusal to embrace it mirrors the individual and societal refusal to accept transformation, clinging instead to a status quo demanding conformity. Nostalgia becomes its weapon, erasing truths about narratives and ourselves by dismissing them as simple childhood dreams that never existed. In doing so, it fosters fear and apathy, suppressing those who challenge the system it upholds. For viewers who hold this misreading, it reflects a broader refusal to confront the violence of a system that demands conformity at the expense of humanity. Owen's story resonates deeply for trans viewers as a warning and a mirror of our struggles, but for many cis audiences, it became another story to dismiss, an act of denial as profound as Owen's own. The violent irony is that by forcing the film into a worldview that they understand, cis viewers reveal themselves not just as passive participants in these systems, but often active enforcers. By consuming the film through a lens created within the artificial boundaries of the world they are already comfortable with and dismissing the validity of experiences outside of them, these audience members replicate the very systems of dominance and oppression the film critiques. I Saw the TV Glow says that to survive, to be yourself, You must kill the voice that is telling you to kill yourself, to conform. For trans people, this is not hypothetical. The closet doesn't just take joy, it can swallow you whole.
I'm dying right now!
That scene captures what it feels like to be trans in America right now. Like I Saw the TV Glow, The Matrix was a story of internal awakening, a realization that one has been made a passive observer in their own life, trapped within a system of control. But unlike Owen, however, Neo chose liberation. He takes the red pill, stepping into a movement of resistance against a world that tried to define who he was, choosing his own name and identity.
My name is Neo.
Capitalism, true to form though, reclaimed and distorted the narrative of The Matrix in the years after it was released. Endless copycat films were made, and the film's technological wonders, once rich with deeper meaning, were stripped of subtext and repurposed into shallow spectacles. The story of internal awakening and self-liberation was warped into a hyper-masculine fantasy. Movies that copied its formula and figures like Andrew Tate amplified this distortion, using the imagery to peddle hyper-masculine money-grifting ideologies, while far-right groups co-opted the concept of the red pill as a symbol of their agenda.
The Matrix is strong. The system which is designed to keep you as a slave is strong. How could it exist any other way? Because there's very few of them and there's a lot of you. The system is extremely strong and it's designed to keep most of the people at the bottom slaving away, praying to have money they're never going to have so that those at the top can stay filthy, filthy rich. To attack a system like this, you need to wait for an opportunity. There has to be a chink in the armor. Something has to happen, which the Matrix has not prepared itself for. So there's an opportunity for the masses, for people at the bottom, for the shit munchers to break through and become ultra high net worth individuals, as I have.
This perversion of the film's message, a story rooted in liberation and self-identification, has been openly denounced by one of the film's creators, highlighting the stark divergence between the original vision and its capitalist hijacking. So, when Warner Brothers sought to wring more profit from the Matrix brand by forcing a new installment into the franchise, Lana Wachowski stepped in to direct The Matrix Resurrections so it wouldn't be passed off to someone else who would just regurgitate the original film. And many have argued that due to this, Resurrections is a film that hates itself. A cynical act of sabotage designed by Lana to destroy the franchise and burn it to the ground for good. They argue it's nihilistic just how they argue I Saw the TV Glow's ending is. But in truth, like how Owen does not hate his true self, just can't see it, Resurrections does not hate itself either. It simply hates the system that forced its existence and necessitated its message. And it chooses not to hide from that fact for even a second.
They took your story, something that meant so much to people like me, and turned it into something trivial.
In the film, Neo was no longer able to be seen as the iconic hypermasculine savior archetype that many fans of the original film idolized. Instead, we find him depowered, trapped in a cycle of alienation, grinding away on a treadmill of creative futility as a video game developer trapped again back in the Matrix. Neo, like Lana Wachowski, is forced to remake the Matrix within the film's own diegesis, for the literal profit of Warner Brothers.
Things have changed, the market's tough. I'm sure you can understand why our beloved parent company, Warner Brothers, has decided to make a sequel to the trilogy.
What?
They informed me they're gonna do it with or without us.
I thought they couldn't do that.
Oh, they can. And they made it clear they'll kill our contract if we don't cooperate.
A direct commentary on the pressure to commercialize one's legacy. The visual of Neo's depletion as he takes blue pills over and over again just to keep going back to work and sell his own soul mirrors I Saw the TV Glow's critique of a system's vampiric use of labor. It runs you to death for its own sustenance, stripping any meaning from your heart. The story of the original Matrix has become part of maintaining the Matrix itself. And this co-option culminates in Neil Patrick Harris's analyst character, Neo's supposed therapist, but in truth his Matrix middle managing controller, even reveals how the system has weaponized Neo's greatest power, bullet time.
You gave me the idea. Allow me to sum up our goal in a single word: bullet time.
In the original film, bullet time symbolized reclaiming agency over time, a rejection of culture that capitalizes and commodifies every second for efficiency. In many ways, it represents a queer perception of time. Bullet time doesn't just bend time, it creates space for a different, more liberating temporal experience. One that imagines a world beyond the rigid confines of capitalist heteronormative time structures and rhythms. That every second must be utilized, optimized, made to fulfill its greatest potential. Over the years, bullet time devolved into a shallow stylistic trope ubiquitous in Hollywood action films. An iconic moment, but now one with no substance, its metaphorical meaning stripped and replaced by an empty aesthetic. Just the same, the analyst takes this once liberating visual and turns it into a tool of control, using it to imprison Neo within the Matrix. What was once freedom has been corrupted into an instrument of oppression, reflecting how even radical ideas can be co-opted by systems of power. And this chilling repurposing mirrors how anti-capitalist and queer art, as well as art made by marginalized and colonized communities, is often consumed, stripped of its radical intent, and sold back to white, cis, straight audiences who denied or were ignorant to the original message as hollow spectacle. In this sense, Resurrections is a deeply self-aware work, almost painfully so. It acknowledges that the original Matrix inspired millions with its message of liberation, only for that message to be twisted and commodified.
I know. Kinda ironic. Using the power that defined you to control you.
By addressing this directly, Resurrections forces its audience to reckon with how even art that challenges the system can become complicit in perpetuating it when consumed without critical reflection. However, like TV Glow, Resurrections is not resigned to nihilism. Its thesis simply rejects the very idea of the lone hero conquering the system. The film underscores that Neo was never truly the one. Instead, it was his connection to Trinity that created that power, revealing the myth of a solitary savior as a lie.
We worked for years trying to activate your source code. I was about to give up when I realized Trinity. It was never just you. Alone, neither of you is of any particular value. Like acids and bases, you're dangerous when mixed together. Every sim where you two bonded, let's just say bad things happened.
It was their love that created their power in the first movie, and it's the same power the Matrix now harvests by keeping them close, but always away from each other and isolated.
As long as I managed to keep you close, but not too close, I discovered something incredible.
Resurrections retroactively states that it was Neo and Trinity's queer love that made them the one, recontextualizing the first three films to not being about a hero, but about collective action. Symbolically, Trinity is both a representation of Neo's transgender self, the representation of the woman that he yearns to be, demonstrating the strength that comes from embracing one's heart and identity, as well as a person with her own identity and selfhood. Trinity can be read as a cis lesbian, and is trapped in compulsory heterosexuality in Resurrections, but releases herself from that through her connection and love to Neo. It is queer love and connection which gives them both power and which liberates them. These coexisting, overlapping, and seemingly contradictory readings critique mainstream narratives of a singular interpretation, one that centralizes a single voice and power, and instead invites a queer interpretation that celebrates connection over domination, asserting that truth is not singular but a symphony of possibilities, where liberation lies in embracing the full spectrum of multiplicity and overlap of self-identity, love, and truth. That we must love the other inside of ourselves, symbolized by Trinity being Neo's inner trans woman, but also love the other who is not us, with Trinity here being seen as her own person who loves Neo, and who he loves back. This collaboration between Neo and Trinity literally remakes the world. She flies, like Neo did in the first film, not as a sidekick, but as an equal. Their connection transcends the Matrix itself. Rejection of collective narratives is a large part of why edgelords never understood the first two Matrix sequels, and especially the Zion sections. Resurrection extends its critique to a contemporary culture's obsession with nostalgia. The film isn't merely a sequel, it's a metatextual deconstruction of what it means to revisit the past, how it can attack nostalgia, and especially the weaponized great man narratives that it creates. If we look back through history, many of the great men that were supposedly the movers and shakers of what became our world today were themselves not great men, but those who were part of a much larger collective movement that we have just attributed to singular people to make it easier for our narratives and easier for colonization to tell its own story. The movie also demonstrates the potential for change, however small it may seem, that can grow into something bigger. For instance, machines and humans now work together in Io because Neo in the initial trilogy demonstrated the value of collective resistance, not by appealing to the machine's interests on their own terms, but by embodying on his own resistance through community building, even if he failed to entirely bring the Matrix down.
That's what I meant. What you changed that nobody believed could ever be changed. The meaning of our side.
Others, like the non-binary coded Bug, saw him fly, saw the real him, even when everyone else failed to understand what he was trying to say.
Back then I was just like any other copper, pretending my life. Until I looked up and I saw you. It was a different you, but I saw the real you. Just a second before you leapt.
The Matrix Resurrections is about how our stories are gutted, our dreams colonized and sold back to us as hollow echoes, rewritten to convince us that they were always empty, to make us believe that our reality is just another fiction, one they dreamed up for us, void of meaning, void of us. But it is also about how even through that lie they sell us, there are still those of us who truly see each other.
And you never fell.
Similarly, people understood The Matrix, the original film, for the radical metaphor that it was, even if the system kept Lana stuck on a treadmill for profit. Both I Saw the TV Glow and Resurrections confront the fear of embracing our true selves. But where one warns of the cost of denial, the other declares that our hearts are the key to not only liberation, but connection, and eventually, resistance. I Saw the TV Glow and The Matrix Resurrections use metaphor to show that while trans experiences are specific, the pain of living in a society that denies your humanity is universal. To be trans is to reject these systems, to choose yourself and your community, and to make visible the pain they inflict while reclaiming the vulnerability they teach us to fear. They show us the flame that is our heart. Yet both Resurrections and I Saw the TV Glow declare that it is not just trans pain, this is everyone's pain. They remind us that the heart, though buried beneath the roles we are forced to perform, still glows. You just have to choose to see it. And if you do, people will see the real you, will see your flame, they will see you fly. And in that recognition, we must build communities of resistance. And that is why fascism must vilify transness. It cannot survive the truth of exposed hearts or the possibility of choosing a narrative beyond oppressor and oppressed. For a trans woman to claim her womanhood, a lesser identity in fascist eyes, it destroys its entire worldview. Transness calls us to connect, not only to our hearts, but to each other. These works insist that the struggle to exist authentically in a dehumanizing world is one we all share. Through connection and reflection, we resist together. Transness is not a them, it is a bright us, and it shines deep in all of our hearts. When The Matrix Resurrections debuted, it was panned for lackluster CGI, weak fights, and a diminished Neo. All elements that were precisely the point of the movie. Audiences craved the hyper-masculine savior and cool fight sequences from the original trilogy, but the film rejected that illusion. Its perceived failures were deliberate critiques, reframing how we get to liberation in a world that turns dreams into shallow products.
You've lost something, Tom. You're not what you used to be.
Yet critics dismissed its radical message, focusing on aesthetics while ignoring its calls for collective action. This discomfort mirrored The Last Jedi from a few years before, which also dismantled the great man myth and enraged fans clinging to nostalgic hero worship. But while The Last Jedi sparked loud, often racist, misogynistic backlash, Resurrections faced a quieter erasure, a dismissal as insidious as the attacks on trans inclusion. The discomfort around challenging, sometimes imperfect narratives often results in this kind of effort towards removing them from acceptable culture. Either these stories are met with dismissal of the messages often embedded in art created by minorities simply by refusing to engage with it at all, Or they are met with dedicated efforts to vilify explicit minority representation, stepping into stories that used to center the worldview of white, cis, patriarchal capitalist control that has been artificially and violently enforced. They cannot see beyond the stories they've internalized, the myths that obscure their hearts. Yet even in the darkness, there are still those who fight to let their collective light shine through.
I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see.
Star Wars has long relied on the myth of a singular hero shaping history. From Luke's neoliberal democracy-saving arc to Anakin's fascist descent and Rey's preservation of a flawed status quo, the franchise clings to the idea that change comes from exceptional individuals, not shared struggle. The Last Jedi tried to challenge this with themes of failure and collective effort.
That's how we're gonna win. Not fighting what we hate. Saving what we love.
But Episode 9 rejected it, reaffirming the great man narrative. Yet Star Wars does offer a response to this problem. The beauty of Star Wars Andor lies in how it navigates the internal struggles of its characters, particularly Cassian Andor, as a reflection of the systemic oppression surrounding them. At the start of the show, Cassian is a man closed off, driven by a singular personal mission, finding his sister. This quest isn't merely about family. It's a desperate attempt to reclaim a connection to the culture and community stripped from him when the Republic, the predecessor of the Empire, exploited and destroyed his homeland for its resources, and one that showcases that the fascism of the Empire is actually a direct extension of the colonial oppression of the neoliberal government that it was built out of. But Cassian's story truly begins with him resisting the vulnerability required to join a greater cause, even as he exists in Ferrix, a tight-knit working-class community surviving under the Empire, rooted in solidarity and care.
I always wanted to be lifted. I was always eager, always waiting to be inspired. I remember every time it happened, every time the dead lifted me.
Cassian lives among the people who trust one another enough to hang their gloves on a communal wall each day, a symbolic act of shared humanity and trust. But Cassian keeps himself apart, seeing his survival as an individual endeavor, disconnected from the collective. Just like Owen or Neo taking the blue pill, Cassian repeatedly refused the calls to action throughout the show.
I'll take the drop-off. And do what? Continue as you are? They'll use the same rope to hang you, whether it's for a plasma coil or 20 million credits. I'm offering you everything you want, all at once.
What is everything I want? Since you know so much about me.
To put a real stick in the eye of the Empire.
When Rebel Cell leader Luthen offers Cassian a chance to fight the Empire by taking part in a heist of some of its money, Cassian views it as a transactional opportunity to escape the situation that he lives within, not a chance to build something bigger. Instead, even after the heist, he spends much of the series trying to escape. Escape from responsibility, escape from fascism, escape from a fight that he doesn't feel he should have to engage with.
People are standing up.
Yeah, and getting killed for it.
But there's work that will need doing.
Yeah? What is that?
Whatever it takes. I've been lying around waiting to die long enough.
You can't beat them, Marva.
Not if I run away.
It's only when he's completely incidentally imprisoned by the Empire for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, ensnared in a system of forced labor designed to extract every ounce of usefulness from its captives, that Cassian begins to wake up, just like Neo and Owen are asked to wake up. In the prison, the dehumanization is suffocating. Men are reduced to numbers and shifts, cogs in a machine whose purpose they don't even fully understand. Forced to act in competition with the men around them as they tire away to unknowingly make literal cogs for the ultimate machine of mass genocide, the Death Star. It's here, amid despair, that Cassian learns the power of collective action to organize, inspire, and fight, not just for himself, but for everyone crushed under the Empire's boot. He helps lead a prison outbreak, one which only succeeds when he actively breaks down the way prisoners are forced into competition with each other, forming a strong collective.
How long we hang on, how far we get, how many of us make it out, all of that is now up to us.
Wherever you are, right now, get up. Stop the work. Get out of your cells. Take charge and start climbing. They don't have enough guards, and they know it. But if we wait until they figure that out,
it'll be too late. We will never have a better chance than this.
But Andor the show doesn't shy away from the cost of this resistance. The show lingers longer than most films or TV shows would do on shots of nameless characters dying in moments of collective action, highlighting the pain, the loss, and the endless toil of fighting back. Many characters die, not in heroic, glamorous ways, but in sudden, brutal moments that feel achingly real. Nemik, the young idealist with a manifesto, is crushed under the weight of the Empire's greed, quite literally. His dreams living on only through his words.
Tyranny requires constant effort. It breaks. It leaks. Authority is brittle.
Kino Loy, the reluctant prison leader, finds his voice to inspire a revolt, only to later admit that he can't swim.
I'll swim.
Unable to reach the freedom with everyone else that he fought for and inspired, meaning that he knew the moment he instigated the revolt on this island prison, it meant his death. But he chose to do so for everyone else anyways, because he knew that he was dead under fascism regardless.
And I would rather die trying to take them down than giving them what they want.
The series confronts us with the reality that resistance is a continual struggle, one that requires sacrifice and often comes without guarantees of success. But it argues passionately and powerfully that it is still worth it, that there is still time, that the act of fighting, of standing together is itself a form of victory. And in doing so, over time, you win back not only your soul, but the soul of your future.
These moments of defiance will have flooded the banks of the Empire's authority, and then there will be one too many. One single thing will break the siege. Remember this. Try.
Andor the show is what Star Wars originally aspired to be, a story of rebellion, of hope born from despair, of people discovering their capacity to fight for something larger than themselves. It, unlike the original trilogy, succeeds because it rejects Campbell's white supremacist, patriarchal great man. It's a reminder that the systems that oppress us can only be dismantled through collective action. While Andor may not wield the lightsabers and mysticism of its predecessors, it holds the light of a galaxy far, far away, and tells us that even within one light, there's always a spark that can ignite the rest. Despite its richness, Andor faced misinterpretation and dismissal, particularly in online spaces dominated by shallow analysis and reactionary takes within fandoms. Critics like Star Wars Theory derided it as boring or overly serious, refusing to engage with its thematic depth. These critiques reflect the same rejection of complexity that Andor challenges. The series rejects fan service-heavy nostalgia, the hallmark of Disney-era Star Wars, with its shallow callbacks, instead asking viewers to sit with discomfort, confront complacency, and grapple with the cost of action and inaction. For some, this lack of spectacle felt like a betrayal of what Star Wars should be. Yet Andor wasn't attacked as viciously as projects like The Acolyte or Obi-Wan, or even the sequel trilogy, which faced heightened backlash often directed at their black and female leads. This disproportionate outrage hints at the anti-blackness, racism, and sexism baked into much of Star Wars discourse. Andor is ignored in favor of more surface-level representations that provoke anger, exposing a deep discomfort with stories that ask us to think critically about power and complacency, our inability to truly take it in. Instead, focusing more easily on the stories they can scapegoat into entitled narratives of aggrievement and victimhood. Fascism is trauma. It thrives on pain. It twists the human capacity for connection into cycles of violence and domination, insisting that the fault lies within us, rather than in the systems that isolate and harm us. Fascism demands that we harden ourselves, and it calls this hardness strength, but it is really a hollowing out, a stripping away of our capacity to feel, to care, to love. It weaponizes this emptiness, convincing men that their pain is proof of their failure to dominate, and then offers them scapegoats, trans people, immigrants, women, Jews, as false targets for their anguish. The result is not healing, but further alienation, a system feeding on the very despair that it creates. But there is a way out. There is a light in the darkness. On the surface, My Dinner with Andre is a simple film about a conversation, a dinner between old friends, a theater director, and a playwright. But beneath the surface, it is a confrontation with the creeping hollowness of a capitalist world. How it numbs us, fragments us, and cuts us off from each other and ourselves. In the state of isolation, where connection is transactional and meaning is commodified, fascism finds fertile ground. Andre talks about his travels around the world, his experiments in living, and his desperate attempts to feel alive. These attempts are radical and often strange, but fundamentally about reclaiming connection, whether to Earth, to community, or to his own body.
And then they shoveled dirt into the grave, so that I really had the feeling of being buried alive.
A little bit after my 22nd birthday, I paid this burnout kid who used to hit on me in the food court $50 to bury me alive.
And after being in the grave for about half an hour, I didn't know how long I'd be in there.
I said to myself, what you're doing is crazy. But another part of me knew that it wasn't. That it was survival.
I was resurrected, lifted out of the grave, blindfold taken off, and run through these fields, and we came to a great circle of fire with music and hot wine, and everyone danced until dawn. And then, at dawn, to the best of our ability, we filled up the graves and went back to New York.
When we need to go back down into the soil, the longer you wait, the closer you get to suffocating.
Wallace Shawn, playing himself and also the writer of the film, is pragmatic and cynical, instead defending the comforts of routine and security.
But my electric blanket, Andre, because New York is cold in the winter. Our apartment is cold. It's a difficult environment. Our lives are tough enough as it is. I'm not looking for ways to get rid of the few things that provide relief and comfort. On the contrary.
This isn't the Midnight Realm, Maddie. It's just the suburbs.
I'm looking for more comfort because the world is very abrasive. I'm trying to protect myself because really there are these abrasive beatings to be avoided everywhere you look.
Yeah, but Wally, don't you see that comfort can be dangerous? You like to be comfortable and I like to be comfortable too, but comfort can lull you into a dangerous tranquility.
Even as he admits they are dulling his senses.
She thought she'd traveled a greater distance just by journeying from her origins in the suburbs of Chicago to that New York evening than her grandmother had traveled in making her way from the steppes of Russia to the suburbs of Chicago.
I found myself wondering, what if she was right?
Even though by performing these roles all the time, we're just hiding the reality of ourselves from everybody else. We live in such ludicrous ignorance of each other. We usually don't know the things we'd like to know, even about our supposedly closest friends. Suppose you're going through some kind of hell in your own life. Well, you would love to know if your friends have experienced similar things, but we just don't dare to ask each other.
No, it'd be like asking your friend to drop his role.
We just put no value at all on perceiving reality. On the contrary, this incredible emphasis that we all place now on our so-called careers automatically makes perceiving reality a very low priority.
Their dialogue, then, is a microcosm of our collective struggle. Do we accept the alienation that capitalism demands in exchange for survival? Or do we risk everything to find something real, something human? Andre is a prophet of sorts, warning of what lies ahead if we choose the former path. He sees relationships are being replaced with transactions, reducing every aspect of life, work, love, even art, to something that's bought or sold. In doing so, it strips us of our ability to care, to resist, to imagine alternatives. It convinces us that our despair is personal and our loneliness unique. It then uses this isolation to pit us against each other.
And if you're just operating by habit, then you're not really living.
And who did it turn out we were fighting? Ourselves.
We don't see the world. We don't see ourselves. We don't see how our actions affect other people.
Fascism, then, is not an aberration, but an extension of capitalism's logic. It is the promise of order in the chaos capitalism creates. offering community through exclusion and meaning through domination. It offers the illusion of solidarity while deepening the wounds it claims to heal, spreading an all-encompassing darkness that consumes every flicker of hope and humanity in its path.
And that this is the beginning of the rest of the future now, that from now on there'll simply be all these robots walking around, feeling nothing, thinking nothing. And there'll be nobody left almost to remind them that there once was a species called a human being, with feelings and thoughts, and that history and memory are right now being erased, and soon nobody will really remember that life existed on the planet. And that we're probably going back to a very savage, lawless, terrifying period.
But even if we can't see it, there's still something here in the darkness. And the way out, as Andor suggests, is through.
They're feeling that there'll be these pockets of light springing up in different parts of the world, and that these will be, in a way, invisible planets on this planet. And that as we, or the world, grow colder, we can take invisible space journeys to these different planets, refuel for what it is we need to do on the planet itself, and come back. Where people can come and reconstruct a new future for the world.
Because even though we've hidden our hearts, they still shine. And to be able to see it, we need to reimagine what it means to be alive together, not through grand revolutions, but with small acts of defiance, like reclaiming dinner tables as spaces for connection and forming collectives that prioritize care over profit. In a world designed to keep us apart and deprive us of joy, small acts of care and kindness are radical. They remind us that there is still light. They show us tiny glimpses of our own hearts to each other. My dinner with Andre is both a warning and an invitation. It tells us that the darkness is already here, and that it is growing, and that it can feel all-encompassing, especially if we close off our hearts. But it also reminds us that we are not powerless. Our ability to love, to care, to build remains intact, even if we buried it beneath layers of alienation. The way out is not to harden ourselves further, but to soften, to open, to risk vulnerability in a world that punishes it. Only then can we reclaim our hearts, and with them, our humanity, because humanity cannot exist in isolation, for we are all sparks in a shared flame, only shining when we burn together. What we need now most of all is stories that go further, beyond just stories of resistance, stories of futures that we can build collectively. A world not unbound from the constraints of our present, but building off the scars that we have to carry. Star Trek, of course you know I bring it there, is a shining example. It offers a vision not only of a brighter tomorrow, but a roadmap for imagining a queer dream of the future. As Jose Esteban Munoz writes,
"Queerness is not yet here. Queerness is an ideality. Put another way, we are not yet queer, but we can feel it as the warm illumination of a horizon imbued with potentiality. We have never been queer, yet queerness exists for us as an ideality that can be distilled from the past and used to imagine a future. The future is queerness's domain."
In Star Trek, queerness emerges not through individual characters or themes, but through its broader ethos. The belief in humanity's capacity to create a better world through mutual understanding, care, and connection. And among all its iterations, Deep Space Nine delves most profoundly into this idea. It envisions a future that doesn't ignore the traumas of colonialism, but instead acknowledges them, integrating them into its foundations for growth. The show's eponymous main location itself is emblematic of this. The station Deep Space Nine used to be the imperialist Cardassians' mining station, where they forced and oppressed indigenous Bajoran people into labor and death for their resource extraction. But now, Deep Space Nine, once a site for exploitation and oppression, is transformed into a hub of solidarity, connection, and hope as the series builds. The lead character, Benjamin Sisko, a Starfleet officer, attempts to explain linear time in the show's pilot episode to aliens seen as prophets by the Bajoran people. These prophets experience time not as linear, but as happening all at once. And so to explain linear time, Sisko uses the metaphor of the game of baseball, a favorite pastime that Sisko uses to center his own identity.
It comes down to throwing one pitch after another and seeing what happens. With each new consequence, the game begins to take shape.
And you have no idea what that shape is until it is completed.
That's right. In fact, the game wouldn't be worth playing if we knew what was going to happen.
You value your ignorance of what is to come?
That may be the most important thing to understand about humans. It is the unknown that defines our existence.
This understanding of time is how Sisko defines not only himself, but humanity as a whole. He describes humanity through anticipation of the next moment, of the days to come, how we cherish the not knowing, the discovery, and the hope of exploration, a Star Trek ideal.
We are constantly searching, not just for answers to our questions, but for new questions. We are explorers. We explore our lives, day by day. And we explore the galaxy, trying to expand the boundaries of our knowledge. And that is why I am here. Not to conquer you with weapons or with ideas, but to coexist and learn.
This is what humanity is to Sisko. Thus, perception of time beyond the present by glancing at the past to understand the future, and being closer to humanity becomes linked and interchangeable with the performance of the hopeful Federation and the humanity of Star Trek as an ideal future. Like how Resurrections and TV Glow look at how queer time has been commodified, Deep Space Nine's constant discussion of time mirrors Munoz's conception of queer futurity, which suggests that queerness does not exist fully solely in the present, but lives in the potential of what can be. However, the prophets point out to Sisko that he exists in one singular moment in time, his point of trauma. His thoughts and emotions constantly are pulled back to the moment of his wife's death.
What is the point of bringing me back again to this?
We do not bring you here. You bring us here.
You exist here. Then give me the power to lead you somewhere else. Anywhere else.
We cannot give you what you deny yourself. Look for solutions from within, Commander.
A death caused textually by the Borg, but also the Federation's best captain, Picard, who had been assimilated into Locutus, a Borg at the time. Sisko is quite literally traumatized by the hero of Star Trek as a franchise, traumatized by the Federation that was supposed to protect him.
I see her like this.
None of your past experiences help prepare you for this consequence.
And I have never figured out how to live without her.
And thus, by the grammar the episode has established with its linguistics of time, queerness is found in existing within seeing the pain of our past, and seeing how it affects our present and what it means for our striving for a future that must inherently incorporate the two. It means accepting that we are all tied to trauma, yes, one caused by the systems that we exist within, but that we're also striving for a future as well. To find a sense of identity within the liminality of the pain systems enact upon us and the scars it leaves behind on our souls.
We're aware that every choice we make has a consequence.
But you claim you do not know what it will be.
We don't.
Then how can you take responsibility for your actions?
We use past experience to help guide us.
Sisko's explanation to the prophets leads him to become the emissary to the Bajoran people, a holy position. The Bajoran people, who endured decades of colonial violence and cultural erasure, must now navigate the difficult process of reclaiming their identity while integrating into a broader galactic community that often misunderstands their pain. Their journey mirrors Sisko's personal arc, a negotiation of past wounds with the hope of building a future that does not erase or ignore them. Bajor's resistance and subsequent recovery echoes the struggles of colonized nations and peoples to reclaim their sovereignty and cultural identity in the wake of imperial domination. Meanwhile, as the series continues, Cardassia, their former oppressors' continuation of colonialism and descent into and reckoning with fascism, speaks to the ways societies build on systemic oppression and must confront their past to avoid perpetuating cycles of violence, and likely will fall more into it before they find their way out of the darkness.
Maritza, who was good for nothing but cowering under his bunk and weeping like a woman, who every night covered his ears because he couldn't bear to hear the screaming for mercy of the Pejorans.
Why are you doing this?
For Cardassia. Cardassia will only survive if it stands in front of Bajor and admits the truth. My trial will force Cardassia to acknowledge its guilt. And we're guilty, all of us. My death is necessary.
What you're asking for is another murder. Enough good people have already died.
Even more specifically though, as a black man leading a predominantly white organization like Starfleet, and a black man leading a show that has predominantly had white leads like Star Trek, Sisko and actor Avery Brooks carry the weight of representing an idealized federation while embodying a cultural history shaped by systemic oppression. In one of the best episodes of the show, Far Beyond the Stars, Sisko experiences the life of a black science fiction author in the 1950s who creates the character of Sisko and Deep Space Nine. The episode examines how Sisko relates to the history of violent anti-black racism, but also highlights how art that imagine futures beyond current struggles and oppression are not only valuable but necessary in imagining how we push towards making those futures real, and how much the system tries to shut down, ignore, silence, or violently push back against those stories being told to the public.
That future, that space station, all those people, they exist in here. In my mind, I created it. And every one of you know it. You read it. It's here. You hear what I'm telling you? You can pop a story, but you cannot destroy an idea. Don't you understand? That's ancient knowledge. You cannot destroy an idea. That future, I created it, and it's real. Don't you understand? It is real. I created it, and it's real.
Benny Russell, the man who created Sisko, has his story rejected, and a character played by the same actor who plays Sisko's son is beaten to death by cops, played by the same actors who play the fascists in the future of Deep Space Nine. This killing of black youth by fascist cops is by no means an incidental metaphor. But back in Deep Space Nine, Sisko's role as a father to Jake, for instance, highlights a form of black fatherhood rarely seen in mainstream media, even now. A tender, involved in aspirational relationship that is not defined by struggle, but by love and shared growth.
Jake, you didn't have to do this. Not for me.
For you, and for the boy that I was. He needs you more than you know.
Sisko teaches Jake not only how to navigate the challenges of the world, but also how to find joy, passion, and purpose within it. Sisko himself maintains cultural ties through cooking, especially through learning from Sisko's father, a Creole chef. This contrasts with other Star Trek shows before Deep Space Nine, and sometimes after it, and their tendency to strip their human characters of specific cultural identities in favor of a post-racial, universalist narrative. Even when it does try to show specific cultural heritages, it often presses them into a universalist mold, such as with the character of Chakotay on Star Trek Voyager, where he's depicted as a sort of hodgepodge of different indigenous tribes, meant to represent them all, and as a result representing none. Sisko's Creole heritage, his cooking, and his grounding in a specific cultural lineage make his character not just a leader, but also a symbol of how cultural specificity can enrich the broader ideals of us all. Deep Space Nine's greatest strength lies in how it challenges Western expectations of nostalgia, story, and universalist homogenized identity. It reimagines utopia not as a preordained outcome, but as a continuous collective process fraught with pain, conflict, and the necessity of self-reflection. In contrast to the polished optimism of Star Trek: The Next Generation, which often frames progress as an inevitable trajectory, Deep Space Nine insists that progress must be earned by grappling with the wounds of history and resisting systems of oppression, both external and internal. DS9 stands as a reminder that it is the outcasts, the ones who have endured the sharp edges of systemic oppression, yet still choose their hearts and each other, who best understand what it means to dream beyond it. These are the characters and stories that push back against fascism and colonialism both from within and without, as the story of Deep Space Nine's later seasons bear out in the fights against Cardassia the Dominion, and even the turning of the Federation itself into something shaped by war and trauma, as they try to centralize power in different and more violent ways. The dreams of the main characters of the show are not shaped by nostalgia for a past they never benefited from, but by the radical imagination born of their survival from it in the hopes of the ideals that inform their present. In this way, Deep Space Nine breaks free of Western storytelling's fixation on cyclical nostalgia and inevitable progress, showing instead that transformation does not always come from the past, but requires struggle, honesty, and the willingness to dream beyond the systems that have always failed us by glancing at the past. In today's nostalgia-driven landscape, Deep Space Nine's insights are more crucial than ever. It reminds us that the hopeful future that Star Trek envisions cannot be reached by clinging to the echoes of the past, but by confronting our cultural and historical traumas, integrating them into our understanding, and using them as fuel for transformation. Only by embracing the uncomfortable truths of our struggles can we illuminate the path forward, turning the flickering hope into a guiding light that grows brighter with every step. But since Deep Space Nine, modern Star Trek has often retreated into the comforting sheen of the Next Generation style of utopia, exemplified most recently by Star Trek Picard Season 3. In that story, nostalgia dominates, with the TNG cast reuniting on a resurrected USS Enterprise D, leaning on the aesthetics and simplicity of a bygone era. The season abandoned complex, morally ambiguous antagonists, characters grappling with the Federation's war crimes and systemic failures, in favor of the Borg Queen, a nostalgic fan service villain who here is flattened into another traumatic figure and a symbol of fascist control that can easily be beaten down by our heroic Federation good guys who never have to grapple with the pain that the Federation caused, even when they had to directly look it in the eye earlier in the season.
So you evolved from the biological experiments. I'm able to pass it on to any who want to join our cause. We link, they accept a shorter life, eternal pain for the ability to fool those who took everything from us.
I didn't know.
How remarkable it is that an enlightened species can ignore each other's pain.
But instead of reaching out to those who the Federation harmed, like the characters at the end of Deep Space Nine did to the Changelings, Picard of Season 3 of Picard decides to kill his own war criminal prisoner, believing that she is too far gone and traumatized.
Right now, she's our prisoner.
The moment we allowed her to board, we invited death onto this ship.
And we instead turn to fighting a cartoon fascist villain, with Picard never having to wrestle with the Federation's crimes, or even his own choice to ignore it. Because the show is more interested in nostalgia, looking to an idealized past, than looking towards a new future. This binary framing of good versus evil reflects a broader Western ideal, that the past holds all the answers and resolution lies in preserving what already exists, not in the messy collective work of transformation. Even the stories of our forward-thinking futures become echoes of the past. Its nostalgic glow resells an echo of utopia, a reselling of a childhood yearning to find oneself on the halls of their favorite starship. Picard Season 3 and Star Trek as a franchise has continually mistaken looking back for moving forward, trading the challenge of growth for the hollow comfort of stasis. By doing so, it says our traumas must remain open and raw for our own good, never to grow and never to heal. Our hearts must always remain closed off to others for fear of pain, separated in the darkness, never connecting. Throughout this video, I've talked about franchises over and over again. How mainstream stories have constantly been co-opted, their potential undermined by systems of power. And it's frustrating because these stories that try to offer visions of resistance, solidarity, and transformation are right here in front of us. But they remain trapped, taken, resold, and reshaped by corporate interests and cultural stagnation for reselling nostalgia. But there are stories, like My Dinner with Andre, that have pushed beyond the limits of mainstream franchise-obsessed frameworks. Ursula K. Le Guin's work also stands as a shining example, daring us to see the world differently, to question our assumptions, and to dream beyond the institutions that we have built. In The Dispossessed, Le Guin challenges us to envision a society not governed by the hierarchies that we know today. The novel's subtitle, An Ambiguous Utopia, signals the complexity of an anarchistic world that it depicts. This is no simplistic paradise, but a world where freedom is entwined with struggle and responsibility. Le Guin, despite saying it's a utopia, doesn't shy away from showing the flaws of this society, nor does she dismiss the hope embedded within its attempts to create something better each and every day. In her hands, science fiction becomes a tool for imagining possibilities we haven't yet considered, yet have always been there in front of us. In her Earthsea books, she interrogates the soul of oppression and death. Ged, the lead character's journey, is one of understanding power and responsibility, of learning that mastery over others is not the same as mastery over oneself. The series weaves in themes of balance and interdependence, drawing from Taoist philosophy to suggest that true power comes from recognizing our place within the interconnected web of life. The first 3 books follow Ged as he grapples with the inevitability of death, the weight of change, and the importance of choosing one's own path over following the expectations of others. And decades after the original trilogy, Le Guin returned to the series with Tahanu and The Other Wind, revisiting her male-dominated narratives to center women's stories and confront the patriarchal structures within not only her worlds, but within her own mind that she had placed into her earlier books. These later stories explore not just individual growth, but how societies can move towards true equality by dismantling oppressive systems, by looking at them directly and understanding how they work. The series as a whole rejects Western storytelling conventions of conquest and heroism, instead embracing a quieter beauty that reflects the rhythms of life itself. The entire 5-book series is one of my favorites of all time. In The Left Hand of Darkness, Le Guin critiques humanity's inability to see past its own cultural contexts. The novel's protagonist, Genli Ai, arrives on the planet Gethian, where the inhabitants are androgynous, shifting between male and female roles during their reproductive cycles. Ai, shaped by the rigid gender norms of his society, struggles to comprehend this fluidity, projecting his biases and assumptions onto the Gethians. His journey forces him to confront the limitations of his worldview, ultimately revealing how deeply our identities are shaped by the cultures we inherit. Le Guin uses this narrative to hold a mirror to our society, exposing the ways we fail to imagine alternatives to our constructed realities. Le Guin understood that stories are not just escapism, but tools for reshaping the ways we see the world and our place within it. She rejected nostalgia because her words are not just mirrors reflecting our reality, but prisms refracting it, showing us the many possibilities that lie beyond our current limitations. By challenging the myths of domination and inevitability, she invites us to dream of futures that embrace difference and interdependence rather than fear them. Her works also remind us that dreaming is not enough, as Le Guin herself wrote.
It is not the business of the novelist to predict the future, but it is the business of the novelist to examine the present, to explore what it means, and to imagine what it could become.
The question is whether we, as readers, will take up the challenge that she lays before us, to see beyond the boundaries of our own time and culture, and to imagine futures that are not yet here, and then to build them together. Another of my favorite writers, Octavia Butler, stands alongside Le Guin as a visionary who challenges the myths of domination, crafting narratives that force us to confront the systems shaping our lives while imagining possibilities. In Kindred, Butler explores the brutal realities of America's legacy of slavery, drawing a visceral connection between the past and the present. The novel's protagonist, Dana, a black woman from the 1970s, is repeatedly pulled back in time to antebellum Maryland, where she must ensure the survival of her own ancestor, a white slave owner named Rufus. Dana realizes that her existence depends on his survival, even as she comes to terms with the horrifying truth that Rufus is her ancestor because he raped enslaved black women under his control. This chilling dynamic forces Dana into an agonizing moral struggle. She must save the life of a man whose power and violence sustain the very systems that are destroying her, both in the past and the present. Pulled between two worlds, Dana repeatedly returns to the present day, attempting to live in her new suburban house with her husband, only to be wrenched back in time, where she is forced to endure, often for years, the brutal realities of slavery in order to ensure the survival of her slave-owning ancestor. Through Dana's harrowing journey, Octavia Butler dismantles the illusion of separation between past and present, revealing how the traumas of slavery, its physical violence, its dehumanizing hierarchies, its entanglement of power and survival, continue to reverberate throughout history in the buildings that we make and the bodies that are its archive. This legacy remains alive, no matter how fervently we as a society try to deny it or insist we have moved beyond it. We cannot have the Star Trek future if we do not reconcile with the present we have today. For those whose histories, bodies, lineages, and cultures are shaped by this violence, true healing is impossible without reckoning, acknowledging, and fundamental transformation of the systems that sustain this legacy. Like Deep Space Nine, Kindred is not just a story of survival, it is a profound exploration of complicity, inheritance, and the binding force of systemic violence, demanding that we confront that freedom from all of its grip is truly possible in our future only if we are willing to face the uncomfortable truths of our shared violent past in our present day. In Dawn, the first book of the Lilith's Brood series, Butler turns her lens towards humanity's future, asking what it means to rebuild after destruction. The story begins with Lilith, a black woman who awakens centuries after humanity has nearly annihilated itself in a nuclear war. She is rescued by the Oankali, an alien species that seeks to interbreed with humanity to create a hybrid race. The Oankali are neither saviors nor oppressors. Their genetic manipulation is both a means of survival and an unsettling violation of autonomy. Butler uses this dynamic to interrogate the boundaries of identity, agency, and consent, posing difficult questions about what it means to be human and whether humanity can evolve beyond its self-destructive tendencies. But what makes Butler's work so profound is her refusal to offer easy answers. In both Kindred and Dawn, she dismantles the binaries of victim and oppressor, self and other, survival and domination. Like Le Guin, Butler saw storytelling as a means of refracting reality, but she also understood that transformation requires discomfort and confrontation, both within the systems around us and within ourselves.
We think what we are told that we think. We see what we are permitted to see. Worse, we see what we are told that we see. Repetition and pride are the keys to this. To see and to hear even an obvious lie again and again and again may be to say it, almost by reflex, then to defend it because we have said it, and at last to embrace it because we've defended it, and because we cannot admit that we've embraced and defended an obvious lie. Thus, without thought, without intent, we make mere echoes of ourselves, and we say what we hear others say.
And yet, society does not talk about Le Guin or Butler as often as we do Asimov or Clarke. Those names dominate the conversation, upheld as the architects of science fiction's golden age. They become the institutions put into collections, bound for us to read forever. But where Asimov and Clarke, who I do love, sketched orderly futures driven by logic and reason based on the worldviews that they were privileged enough to believe was inevitable, Le Guin and Butler wove stories that embraced complexity, ambiguity, and the emotion in the humanity of struggle. Their works weren't about controlling the flow of the future, but about understanding it, its possibilities, its failings, and the radical empathy needed to build a better one, defying the current systems of our world. For those trained to equate emotion with weakness, these works' quiet insistence on being vulnerable becomes unbearable. And by rejecting this vulnerability, they reaffirm the hollow systems of power that oppress them and perpetuate their own alienation. These works' varied invitations to introspection and collective imagination undermine the very narratives they're told to cling to. There's a common theme threading through all the works that I've touched upon today, a resonant echo that asks us to look inward, not to retreat, but to confront the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and where we belong. Each work delves into the internal battles we wage, the narratives we construct to protect ourselves, to isolate, to survive. They remind us that these are constructed fortresses, born of fear or pain, and they often become our self-made prisons. These are stories that insist on the power of community, not as a sentimental ideal, but as a raw, necessary truth.
What if this life we're leading, all of this, you and me, everything, what if all of this is the illusion?
They ask us to risk vulnerability, to let others see the bruised, beating core of who we are and trust that in doing so, we might find strength, not in ourselves alone, but in the spaces where our lives intertwine. Solidarity, they teach us, is not just a strategy, it's a lifeline. It's what turns despair into action, pain into purpose, and isolation into something profoundly and beautifully shared. Each story also illuminates a way out. First through finding ourselves, then through connection, then through solidarity and fighting back, then through finding a way to heal our scars of the violence we have endured, and using those scars, not ignoring them, to see a future. That is the narrative of these stories when they are shared together, when they are put in context of each other. There are so many artists and so much art striving and dreaming and pushing for collective futures in this way. I've just explained a small amount of the magnitudes that have been made and sent out. Many in recent years and in the mainstream. I mean, for heaven's sakes, also read N.K. Jemisin's groundbreaking Broken Earth trilogy, a powerful deconstruction of systems of oppression and environmental exploitation, weaving a story that refuses to separate personal pain from societal devastation, or the destruction of our planet from the destruction of ourselves. Likewise, Saladin Ahmed's Throne of the Crescent Moon takes a scalpel to the Western medievalism that suffocates so much fantasy. By centering unapologetically Muslim protagonists and embedding the story in rich Middle Eastern folklore, Ahmed not only revitalizes the genre, but forces a confrontation with its colonialist underpinnings. The extraordinary TV show Reservation Dogs captures the resilience of indigenous youth, celebrating their enduring connection to cultural history and community despite centuries of genocide and erasure that they have felt by America.
All this, it's how community works. It's sprawling. It spreads. What do you think they came for when they tried to get rid of us? Our community. You break that, and you break the individual.
All of these works don't just expand the canon, they demand we interrogate who built it, and who it serves and who it excludes. Western storytellers cling to the illusion of eternal cycles, epitomized by Joseph Campbell's monomyth, a self-serving narrative that claims that all myths throughout history and culture tell the same story. This lie erases nuance, cultural specificity, and the vast diversity of human tales, forcing them into a one-size-fits-all framework to justify power and control. To say that they're all just telling Western culture stories that we have made the best version of. Many marginalized creators break free of this lie, not by rejecting storytelling, but by reclaiming its purpose. They remember and reimagine stories as tools to preserve cultures beaten down by oppression, to dismantle systems of harm, and to imagine new beginnings. I started with stories by transgender creators in this video because, in many ways, they are my story. How I found my heart after being born into a system that tried to bury me and tell me who I was. Many white trans folks like myself grew up within this myth, told to embody it while turning colonization inward. It's a story I think resonates deeply with many of you in my audience. Not just trans people, but particularly for white people who need to understand this internalized colonizing dynamic. But these stories are just one way out. Different cultures and marginalized groups have their own stories, shaped by their own unique relationships to systems of oppression. While I was fighting colonization going within, I also contributed to colonization hurting others, something that I've needed to learn and unpack in myself. But in the end of the day, we're all fighting the same fight, just on different fronts. Different culture stories aren't simply alternative versions of the same Western monomyth, they're radical rejections of it, pathways towards liberation grounded in the specific truths and experiences of those who tell them. And these stories aren't whispers. They're screams demanding to be heard, yet they're often ignored, dismissed, or drowned out. Why? Because the system we live in, the media we consume, the narratives we're fed, don't provide the prisms to truly understand them, let alone uplift them. These stories challenge the deeply ingrained Western ideals of individualism and extraction, and so they're pushed to the margins, labeled niche, too political, or not good enough. But these stories hold the keys to the future we claim to desire. Throughout this essay, I've shown how these narratives are minimized, ignored, or erased. Western culture has long been a battleground for domination, severing connections by telling us who is other, who doesn't belong, and whose stories we must just see as maybe something off to the side, who must be excluded, to uphold power. It teaches us to internalize hierarchies, to see division as natural, to disconnect from others, and even from ourselves if we belong to those deemed lesser. But the human heart resists. Even as white supremacist patriarchy spins tales of endless cycles of violence, we continually rediscover our own truths. We are constant new lights found in the darkness, and we long to connect, to grow, to see each other's lights, to break free of domination. But to do that, we need to ask the hard questions. Have we truly failed to tell these stories, or have we chosen not to listen, retreating into the static of a hollowed-out world shaped by fascism? A world that teaches silence, emptiness, and despair is all we're meant to know. Is yelling back at fascism the way forward? Or is it just another voice lost in the noise of those who refuse to hear?
I think we're all in a trance. We're walking around like zombies. I don't think we're even aware of ourselves or our own reaction to things. We're just going around all day like unconscious machines.
Felt like one of those dolls asleep in the supermarket. Stuffed.
I mean, I really feel that I'm just washed up, wiped out. I feel I've just squandered my life.
Like chapters skipped over on a DVD.
We've had each other and our work, our days, but we were sleeping.
And you're not conscious of the reality of what's happening to you. You enter the dream world again.
You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he is expecting to wake up.
I've been turning away from a truth I wanted not to face.
You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind.
Do you ever get confused?
What if this life we're leading, all of this, you and me, everything, what if all of this is the illusion?
It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo.
And we'd really feel like Jews in Germany in the late 30s. Get out of here. Of course, the problem is where to go, because it seems quite obvious that the whole world is going in the same direction.
It's here and it's not visiting anymore. It wants to stay. The Empire is a disease that thrives in darkness. It is never more alive than when we sleep.
Its power seems inescapable. So did the divine right of kings.
Tyranny requires constant effort. It breaks. It leaks. Authority is brittle.
There is one way out.
The longer you wait, the closer you get to suffocating.
Question is, what are you going to do?
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back.
And I haven't told you anything tonight that you don't already know.
I didn't come here to tell you how this is going to end. I came here to tell you how it's going to begin.
Tell me.
You are the dreamer. And the dream.
If I could do it again, I'd wake up early and be fighting these bastards from the start.
I don't care if the odds are against us. If we're going to lose, then we're going to go down fighting. So that when our descendants someday rise up against the Dominion, they'll know what they're made of.
I'm going to show them a world without you. A world without rules and controls, without borders or boundaries. A world where anything is possible.
You can pump a story, but you cannot destroy an idea. Don't you understand? That's ancient knowledge. You cannot destroy an idea.
That means that the future is somehow sending messages backwards to the present, which means that the future must exist in some sense already in order to be able to send these messages.
The here and now is a prison house. In the face of the here and now's a totalizing rendering of reality. We must strive to think and feel a then and there. Some will say that all we have are the pleasures of this moment, but we must never settle for that minimal transport. We must dream and enact new and better pleasures, other ways of being in the world, and ultimately, new worlds.
This video could have easily ended at that last section, but I feel like I need to dispense with the highfalutin visual metaphor and air of the previous segments to just talk with all of you. Because the thing that I really want to get across is this. We cannot say that these stories don't exist, because that is the true lie. These stories have been written, filmed, and sung across generations and geographies, cultures, and hearts. And the challenge is not their absence, as we've constantly been saying. We need to amplify different stories, but in reality, it's our collective failure to amplify and, more importantly, contextualize them in ways that resonate with broader audiences. Because while the status quo does attempt to hide these stories from us, its greater danger is how it prevents us from understanding what these stories mean when we do see them. It is our duty to create the platforms and prisms through which these stories can shine, to dismantle the barriers that keep transformative narratives from reaching the people who need them most, and more importantly, from them understanding it in the way they need to most. These stories are here. The question is, are we willing to listen? Because I've spent the last year on this channel talking about how to deconstruct the toxic stories that we've been fed and what better ones that we can offer in their place. But no matter how hard we've tried to talk about this, our cultural conversation, the algorithms that we dance within, don't reward nuance or empathy. They reward anger, binary takes, destroy the right-wing grift, clicks, while open your heart to new narratives dies in the feed. It's the same story being told over and over and over again, and it's all it wants us to see. Even these stories that we tell just get shoved into those narratives, because the second, more meaningful problem is how these stories are weaponized and stripped of their meaning. Young, angry white men or white women upholding patriarchy, those who cling to bootstrap stories of the American dream, or Republicans scapegoating to maintain power, or Democrats debating which inconvenient people to discard, are all telling the same story, and they primed us all to reject anything outside of that worldview, seeing compassion as antagonism and stories of change as attacks. So when we see new stories that could save us, something that are new and different, we've already been primed to reject them.
How does it affect an audience to put on one of these plays in which you show that people are totally isolated now and they can't reach each other and their lives are desperate? Or how does it affect them to see a play that shows that our world is full of nothing but shocking sexual events and terror and violence? Does that help to wake up a sleeping audience? See, I don't think so. Because I think it's very likely that the picture of the world that you're showing them in a play like that is exactly the picture of the world they have already.
Transness, as I've talked about earlier in this video, like so many identities, is reduced to a symbol in a binary political war. Do you support trans people? Then you're leftist. If you oppose it, then you're on the right. Our identities are either vilified as threat to the status quo or commodified into hollow representation. The actual humanity and complexities behind our identities and identities of many marginalized people are erased, the stories of who we truly are. And I don't say stories of who we truly are in a, oh, let me tell you my inner truth. I mean, the stories of what it means to become us, to understand us, are not understood because we choose not to understand stories. What could have been a bridge to understanding becomes just another battleground, another talking point in a war that ignores the hearts it claims to fight for. And the people within them, pleading to be seen as human, are left unheard. They see me, a trans woman trying to open a door, no matter what I say or how I say it, as a symbol on this battle in a political binary war, not a person trying to create a conversation from my heart to yours. And do you know how exhausting that is? This is what I have to offer. This is what I do over and over and over again. I try to tell and make and explain stories about how to open your heart, trust yourself, and see the other both within yourself and in the people around you. But this poison culture doesn't let that message through. And I'm so tired of being dehumanized for the very work that I'm doing. The only thing that I'm able to desperately, pleadingly try to get people to understand. It's what I have to say, and no one, it feels sometimes, is willing to hear it. Even people on the left sometimes bristle at what I and other people are trying to say. I mean, quite literally, I have been more vilified by supposed leftist creators than right-wing folks these past few years, because I have said things like, we shouldn't be focused on what we are against, because, as Le Guin herself said, to oppose something is to maintain it. We, even in progressive spaces, like easy narratives of antagonism. It's simpler. It's what we know. Find the bad guys and fight them till they're dead. This proves your cause is just, and then you can repeat a cycle until you are all that is left, the one on top, the one who won the culture war. Culture war. What a stupid fucking term, but it's accurate for what it is. A war for a culture that we shouldn't be trying to fight over in the first place. It's maddening. It's heartbreaking. And yet here I am still trying. Because despite sometimes feeling like no one hears me, I know there are people who do. But to continue that conversation, we need to stop centering the conversation around those we're fighting. I'm so tired, especially in a post-2024 election, of the same framing. How do we get angry young men to care? How do we break down Republicans' lies? How do we get Democrats to stand up for us? Why is it always about their grievances, entitlements, or tantrums, while the harm they perpetuate is ignored? That's their rules, because people will always claim that someone's success proves meritocracy. We won because our ideas are better. That's not the case, though. We can clearly look at people like fucking Donald Trump and see, no, just because they won an election does not mean their ideas are better. It just means that they get amplified more and more because we only center them. We need to stop fighting in their sandbox. It's time to build, imagine, dream, and play. Instead of reacting to their narratives, we need to create stories that challenge, inspire, and offer something better, a feast for those ready to move beyond their empty promises. And we need to give people the tools to understand how to read these narratives, to understand them, because we're not here to fight for approval. We're here to make something better for ourselves and for everyone who's tired of begging for scraps from systems that will never feed us. Let them get mad at us. Let them rage that we've taken the conversation away from them. Let them scream about being ignored while we're over here laughing and painting and building cities and dreaming about worlds in our minds and figuring out how to build them in front of us. Let them stew in their resentment while we're busy making something new, something joyful, something real out of the imagined. Because the truth is, if we do that, it won't be about leaving anyone behind. It'll be about not waiting for them to catch up before we start. About not centering the most privileged, the ones who yell the most. And when they finally do notice that we are making incredible things, if they want to join in, then great! But the only way in is by playing fair. The only way in is by leaving behind the entitlement and anger and recognize that everyone gets a piece. Otherwise, they can't take part. And if they get mad about it, fuck it. Stay mad. And if they try to take it for themselves, then we punch them in the fucking face. Because we'll still be here playing until they get over themselves. Or they won't. And it won't matter to us. Because this isn't about reaching for some mythical center. This isn't about crafting narratives that convince those who choose over and over and over and over and over again not to listen and ask us to listen to them. Instead, we need to refine the tools on how to find ourselves and our hearts. And stories gave us those tools. Ursula Le Guin gave them to us. Octavia Butler gave them to us. Wallace Shawn, the Wachowski sisters, Jane Schoenbrunn, Tony Gilroy, and so many others keep giving them to us. BIPOC creators are giving them to us. Disabled creators are giving them to us. Queer artists are giving them to us. They're not just writing for the future, they're screaming into the present for us to see the future now. That there is still time to create it, but it's not infinite. And we're over here wasting that time trying to figure out how to get small-minded bigots to listen? Fuck that. The system isn't going to reward us for building something better. It isn't going to magically, algorithmically amplify a vision of compassion and connection. It's going to keep pushing anger because that's what it needs to survive. It's going to keep centering the angry men, the aggrieved masses, the loudest voices shouting into the void because that fuels the engagement. And all engagement needs is clickable content, products, but not stories. But that's not where the magic is. That's not where the future is. The future is in the quiet spaces. The small acts of creation, the moments where we look at each other and say, what if? That's where I want to be. I'm done bending myself into knots trying to make space for their anger. I'm done being reduced to a symbol for their rage. The right offers false certainty and empty simplicity, but we have something more powerful, meaningful possibility. If we can build narratives that embrace that possibility, we can show not just young men, but everyone that belonging and identity don't just have to come at someone else's expense. And I've been framing this video around so-called edgelords or the young right-wing men radicalized to Trump, but you need to understand I am talking to every single one of you. We all need to hear this. So many have been striving to express what solidarity actually means, and let me tell you what it doesn't mean. It doesn't mean shouting over others. It doesn't mean demanding everyone conform to your strategy of how to take down your supposed villains. It doesn't mean your worldview, your way of thinking should get centralized above all. It doesn't mean steamrolling over someone else's voice because you've decided yours is more important. Solidarity isn't about winning. And it's not about leaving people on the cold because you think their fight isn't as urgent as yours. It's about recognizing the ways our struggles overlap. It's about listening and supporting each other in our distinct fights against the same system that does not attack us all the same way, and not taking from each other to do so. And most importantly of all, we need to recognize that we won't be able to do this every single time. We're going to fuck up, we're going to hurt each other, even if accidentally, because we've all internalized colonialism's story. It means letting ourselves grow, but only doing so by holding ourselves accountable. Listen to what I'm saying or don't. But if you can't recognize what solidarity is and what it isn't, then don't pretend you're here to build anything at all other than what you're building for yourself. Here's the truth. Trump didn't gain that many voters recently. He won because fewer people voted, and he managed to rally his own base of racist supporters to come out for him. Perhaps even more so in the face of a biracial black woman that he was running against. And on the surface, that lack of voters coming out, I'm sure felt like a gut punch to many of you. It felt like it to me at the time. But that disillusionment is actually a sign of hope, even if Trump winning is a terrible thing. It tells us that people aren't apathetic. They're just fed up with a system that demands everything and gives back nothing. That exhaustion, that refusal to play along, shows that they're ready for something different. They just don't know what that different thing is yet. We can give that to them.
They don't want freedom or empowerment. They want to be controlled. They crave the comfort of certainty, and that means you two, back in your pods, unconscious and alone, just like them.
We're not here to negotiate anything.
We were on our way to remake your world.
Change a few things.
Kind of like the paint the sky with rainbows idea.
Just remind people what a free mind can do.
I forgot. It's easy to forget.
He makes it easy.
That he does.
By centering our communities, our joy, and our creative visions, we model the kind of world we want to live in. A world that welcomes anyone willing to step out of the binary, out of the anger, and into something more meaningful. A world that doesn't frame empathy as a limited resource to be bartered or begged for, but as a fundamental principle that guides how we build and how we live. That is how we convince people. That is how we propagandize, by creating something vibrant and undeniable and growing from there. Not in the past that they cling to, but in the future we are already building. Grassroots movements, mutual aid, and community-driven change, these are the seeds we can plant to show people they don't have to accept the world as it is. That we can tell a different story about ourselves. Not of a hero with 1,000 faces that will save us by winning elections, but in communities that come together and recognizing each of us. No matter how dark it gets, the truths of the human heart endure, resisting even the systems that demand we extinguish them to conform. As long as at least one heart remains, there is always hope to reignite all the rest. It's about reigniting our belief in our hearts and in each other, in the power of collective action, in the possibility of a world, a community that actually listens and cares, not one that drives apart. People haven't given up on hope. They've just stopped looking for it in the same old places. And that's where stories come in, reminding people to try, that there is still time, that you can paint the sky with rainbows, that you can boldly go, that any human power can be resisted and changed by human beings, that in order to rise from its own ashes, a phoenix must first burn. We've got our own worlds to build, and I want to do it with people who are here, ready, now. I want to build cool things with cool people, and I trust there are enough of you out there, because I've met you, that we can do it. I'm not giving up. I'm just giving up trying to convince people on their terms. The only way forward is through creation, not conflict. Through joy, not justification. Through trust, not terror. So stop asking what they want. Ask what we all need. Then let's make it, together. But the question that you have to answer right now is this: how many hearts? will we lose before we reach out? Remembering that each flame ignites the next, because there is still time. But it's not infinite. We are losing flames. That is the burning urgency I leave you with. Let's not wait. Let's build. Now. Hey there, interwebs! I hope you're all doing well. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was informative. I think that this video is something that I've been wanting to really talk about for a while, and is also just going to be kind of a statement of purpose of things that I'm going to try to be talking about more and more over the next year. To talk about stories that ask us to think about new ways of thinking about the world, that challenge us to think about different ways of seeing the world. I really, this video just meant a lot to me, and so just thank you for watching it. I also should say, to do the self-promoting stuff and also tease up some projects that I'm working on. This video is a companion video to another video that came out earlier this month, so please check out that video. So this should be the video right before this one on my YouTube feed. But also, there is a companion video to this one where I talk about yet another show that I think is telling new stories, and a story that resists and thinks about ways of breaking the cycles of domination that I wasn't able to include in this video just for length purposes, and also didn't really fit into the structure of what I was doing. So if you want to figure out what that is, that is available over on my Patreon. Patreon, by the way, I should say, is how I pay my bills, how I support myself, how I feed myself, my fiance, and my 3 cats. So if you do like any of the work that I do, want to get videos early, want to get extra videos like that one, all that's over on Patreon, as well as your name and videos and things like that. I should also say, and sorry that this is just going to be a little bit of a tease, I am working on some really cool projects this year, like dream projects that are going to be off of YouTube. I cannot officially announce them yet, just for legal reasons, but they are extremely cool. Things I've wanted to do my entire life, and I am so excited and pumped to share them all with you and to also work on them. But as a result of that, that does mean that I'm going to be taking a little bit longer on making YouTube videos for this channel. I'm still planning on doing a bunch. I already have some filmed, and I'm working on them piece by piece, but it is going to be a little bit longer between each release here on YouTube, just so I don't burn myself out working on everything, and wanted to make those other projects, as well as projects that I'm working on here, as best as they can be. And the way that I am able to do that is because I am supported over on Patreon. Like I said, that allows me some sense of like stability and regular income that YouTube never provides, especially at a moment like now where I have to sort of be taking a little bit longer between releases for my own mental health and for my career. Long and short, cool stuff on the way. Patreon supports me doing all those cool things and gets yourself some benefits and perks as well. So please consider supporting me over there. Also, do not forget to support our amazing sponsor for this week's video, which is the wonderful Star Trek Adventures. Please use that link down below. I love Star Trek Adventures. It's a lot of fun. Go support them. And then also support Nebula, which is the streaming service that I am on that is run by creators like me and supports us making cool projects and may have something to do with at least one of the cool projects that I am going to be working on outside of YouTube. And also has my sci-fi film IDENTITEAZE, which I hope is another movie that tries to tell stories that resist as well, that stars the amazing Abigail Thorne, that many of you may know from PhilosophyTube, as well as John Delancey from Star Trek The Next Generation. All right, beyond all of that, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for supporting me, and I hope you all, my friends, live long and prosper. Thank you so much to all of my patrons who help me do what I do. I adore you, and I could not do this without you. But an extra special thank you to Mock at 80, Carrie Ellen Foss, Veronica Fox, Blue, Mary Mello, Barbie Ann Rounds, Sarah Montgomery, Iron, Stephen Clenard, Christian Hurst, Jazz Miss, Jade Stark, Daniel Prone, Randy Thompson, Alex Miller, Lily Blanley, Samuel Howard, Dark Archon, Auntie Kate 808, Vincent Ellington, Tara Rose, Amada Kaiba, Miranda Ketia, Atheistic Snail, Zane Schuschler, Michael Wonet, Super Desi, Meadow Whisperer, Joseph Dewey the Gnome, Sammy Joe Retro, Daihachi, Chris Showers, Lily Gray, Angela Hendricks, Rose Conley, David Demma, Katie Starr, Todd Verling, Cade Kitten, Shep Alderson, Dominic Noble, Cleo McKeever, Anthony Evans, James Krivda, Brian Walters, Villager 138, Farengato, Kalarina Bonbon, W. Randy E.D., Patrick Green, Kevin Frotag, Gumunder Stephenson, Sean Silver, Daryl William Sandifer, Fly Anaconda, Epsilon is greater than, Ryan Hunter, Jamie, Casey Kyle Hampton, Troy Stull, L. Tantivy, Teague Wilson, John Witherby, Alexa Burris, Erica Barrica, Care On, Casual Observer, Sarah Lemero, Patrick Crumpton, Crit Mullen, Jason Knott, Stephen Richardson, Hope Jason Tuliana, Sade Zerd, Zach Prax, Ing Marie, it's Craig Lowe, Penile Sparing Vaginoplasty, Grumpy Dragon 75, Stephen Chapman, Vale Hunkinen, Damian Rice, Sasha M, Pramita Bagchi, Rosalind Bennett, Melinda Walters, Melody Ann Winters Good, White Lion, Sean Piper, Juliana Rigel, Sarah Leslie Hutchkins, Sarah Bystam, Carrie the Neuroturtle, Tyler Edwards, Sophie's Dead Name Walking, Jordy Lucero, Richard Guderizy, Meat Popsicle, Craig and David, Luna, Laura Demeros, Celestial Dawn, Kezzy Garrett Smithinson, Alec Lay Berry, Bruno, Tori Perez, Crit Fax, Lev Goodman, Nyan Fan, Jocelyn Ethersford, Quite Bearish, Michael Weber, Mira G, Maximilian Marks, Henry Pierce, Tom Chi 311, and Julie Werner. Adore y'all. Thank you. Mwah.